What if I told you 47 trucks of weapons were meant to shatter Africa's future, until one leader turned them into school bells? What if the real battlefield was not fought with bullets, but with betrayal, courage, and destiny? This is not just a military operation. It is a war for the soul of a continent. Now, let us uncover the day Africa stood up and won. In a sweeping crackdown led by President Ibrahim Traore, 47 lorries loaded with arms and military-grade munitions were intercepted. The scale and variety of the arsenal uncovered intensified one pressing question: who were these arms intended for, and who orchestrated this operation? The episode unfolded 3 nights ago at midnight in the K region, near Burkina Faso's frontier with Togo. Border patrol units detected suspicious movement during a standard surveillance round. A long procession of trucks was moving along the frontier, an area usually inactive at that hour. The magnitude of the convoy and its timing immediately triggered alarms. Regional Commander Captain Musa Kabo swiftly relayed the alert to top command. Initial intelligence suggested the trucks were hauling humanitarian supplies, but inconsistencies were evident. Why would relief goods be shipped under the cover of darkness? Furthermore, the convoy was navigating obscure dirt roads, bypassing the main transit route. When Traore was briefed, his instincts sensed this was no routine affair. He promptly contacted Special Operations Commander General Ibrahim Traore. "General, intercept the convoy, but tread carefully. This could be more than typical contraband," he ordered. Elite units were activated discreetly. They established a trap along the expected route. Choppers ascended. Surveillance drones locked onto the movement. The enormous convoy of 47 lorries continued ahead, unaware of the looming operation. The maneuver kicked off at approximately 4 a.m. Special forces blocked the path. The trucks halted abruptly. Several drivers attempted to escape in confusion, but the dragnet was closing in. After a brief pursuit, all operatives were detained. Upon opening the first truck, the revelation stunned everyone present. Sophisticated automatic rifles were packed inside sacks labeled as humanitarian aid, AK-47s, M16s, fragmentation grenades, RPGs, and a host of other arms. Every truck resembled a mobile armory. Captain Kabo urgently called Traore. "Mr. President, this is unbelievable. These weapons could equip an entire brigade. This is far beyond illicit trading. Someone is gearing up for conflict inside Burkina Faso." Traore replied with firm composure. "Secure everything. Not a single cartridge must vanish. And extract answers from the drivers. We must identify the masterminds." One of the detained drivers, John Baptiste Ree, was the first to open up. He began to confess, visibly shaken. "They told us we were transporting agricultural equipment. The cargo was to be delivered to a depot in Togo. From there, it would be shipped out." As the questioning intensified, the full magnitude of the scheme surfaced. Most drivers were clueless about the cargo, but the organizers had operated with expert precision. Each vehicle followed a unique path. They departed at staggered times. Their convergence point was the border, where they aligned into a convoy. On the second day, further revelations emerged from meticulous inspections. Serial numbers had been partially removed, but Burkina Faso's intelligence team recovered several through forensic methods. The origins of the arsenal were deeply alarming. Some arms traced back to Libya's civil war. Others had seen action in Yemen. Several were brand new and never deployed. The combined worth of the cash exceeded $100 million. Who had financed this colossal purchase? Traore immediately summoned the National Security Council. An exhaustive report on the confiscated weaponry was presented: 15,000 AK-47 rifles, 5,016 rifles, 3 million rounds of ammunition, 50,000 hand grenades, 1,500 rocket launchers, 200 anti-aircraft missiles, and 20 tons of high explosive. Defense Minister General Dur was stunned. You could conquer a minor nation with this cash. These arms were clearly intended for an uprising or internal conflict. Who would require such an arsenal? Interior Minister Ree was alarmed. "President, if these weapons had been circulated, our nation would have descended into chaos. Extremist factions could have sustained warfare for years, or dissident groups could have launched a coup." Traore rose to his feet. "France, this isn't random. Someone is trying to destabilize our homeland, just like what happened in Libya, Syria, Yemen. But we're alert. We've unraveled their scheme." Intelligence Director Commandant Overregu stepped forward. "Mr. President, one of the detained drivers has started cooperating. The final stop for the arms was clandestine depots in Koo. They were set to be distributed from there." Following this revelation, Ree made a bold decision without delay. Initiate a wide-ranging sweep in Ouagadougou. Inspect all suspicious storage sites. Identify who's expecting this cargo, and above all, track down the financiers. The following morning, dawn operations launched in the capital. Coordinated strikes took place at 23 separate sites. Additional arms were uncovered in 17 of those locations. The magnitude of the stockpiles was staggering. Among those taken into custody were well-known individuals, ex-ministers, retired officers, affluent tycoons, and even certain foreign envoys. What linked them all was their staunch opposition to the Traore leadership. By the fourth day of the crackdown, the most shocking twist surfaced. One of the detained businessmen, Francois, agreed to turn state witness. His disclosure hit like a thunderbolt. He spoke with visible fear. This scheme was set in motion months ago. External forces pledged their backing. We were to unseat Traore. A pro-Western regime would be installed. These weapons were intended for that mission. Traore inquired, which external forces? Francois paused, but eventually responded. Sessions were conducted in Accra. Delegates from Abidjan attended as well. Directives came out of Paris. Authorization was secured from Washington. A heavy silence fell upon the room. The gravity of the statement gripped everyone. Traore said, "Go on." Francois resumed his confession. The strategy was this: first, a series of terror attacks would ignite fear. The masses would panic. Then, opposition movements would mobilize. Collaborators embedded within the military would launch a coup. Even more chilling elements came to light. The covert operation had been labeled Operation Restored Democracy. Its budget stood at $200 million. The weaponry was merely the initial phase. Among the individuals named by Francois Kongu were highly unexpected figures, diplomats from Western embassies, liaisons from global corporations, and even personnel from international NGOs were implicated. In response to this bombshell, Traore resolved to hold a landmark media briefing. The international community needed to understand the scale of this plot. It was time to expose the forces undermining Africa. The briefing aired live across national broadcasters. Several of the confiscated weapons were displayed behind Traore. The visual impact was immense. The heaps of firearms unsettled the public. Traore opened his address. "Dear citizens of Burkina Faso and the international audience, 3 nights ago, we thwarted the largest arms trafficking attempt in our history. But this was more than trafficking. This was an orchestrated plot against our nation." He lifted the documents in his grip. "Here lies the proof: 47 weapon-laden trucks. Estimated value $100 million. The objective was to throw Burkina Faso into turmoil, to pit our people against each other, and to implant a foreign-controlled regime." Traore pressed on, his tone unrelenting. "Where did these arms originate? I cannot yet reveal every detail, but I can confirm this: colonial forces still seek to dominate Africa. But they will fail because we are alert." Journalists in the room began raising questions fervently. A CNN reporter asked, "Which nations are responsible for these arms?" Traore responded, "The inquiry is ongoing, but a portion of the weapons were produced in NATO states." A BBC journalist followed up, "Then who are the masterminds behind this plot?" Traore answered, 17 individuals have been detained. They include ex-ministers and military officers. Witnesses are cooperating. Very soon, the entire truth will emerge." When an Al Jazeera reporter asked, "What impact will this incident have on regional stability?" Traore replied firmly, "This is not just an assault on Burkina Faso, but an assault on the entire continent. Similar plots are underway in Mali, Niger, and Guinea. It's time for joint action." A member of the Russian press queried, "Do you intend to boost security protocols?" Traore affirmed, "Absolutely. Our armed forces are on standby, our borders are under close surveillance, and most critically, our citizens stand with us." The most powerful moment of the press event came when footage of a detainee's confession was shown. Francois Bon Caber appeared on screen. His admission stunned everyone. Bon, weeping, confessed, "They missiled us. They told us, 'You'll bring democracy.' In truth, we would have torn our homeland apart." Traore speaks truth. "We became betrayers. I beg forgiveness from my people." When the recording concluded, the hall was gripped by silence. Traore continued, "This is their true nature. These individuals tried to sell out their homeland for cash, but they didn't succeed, and they never will." As the press event carried on, crowds had started assembling outside. Thousands of citizens had flooded the streets in a show of solidarity with Traore. "Long live Traore! Down with neocolonialism!" They shouted passionately. Traore addressed the masses, "Beloved citizens, because of your unwavering support, we thwarted this plot. Because of your vigilance, our nation stands strong. As long as we stand united, no one can bring us down." Youth led a torchlight march to show their unity. Women sang the national hymn. Elders offered prayers, "May the heavens guard our land." At the same time, messages of encouragement started pouring in from across the continent. Mali's president, Assimi Goïta, declared, "Brother Traore represents Africa's pride. We are also reinforcing our frontiers." Niger's president, General Abdourahmane Tiani, stated, "This operation targets us all. We must enhance intelligence cooperation. The AES must guarantee its defense." Guinea's head of state remarked, "Africa has no room for arms traffickers." Traore's bravery is a model for all African nations. Senegal's leader, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, sent a declaration, "As the African Union, we must enforce the weapons ban rigorously. Our soil must not be a dumping ground for arms." Even Chad's president, Mahamat Diabaye, added his voice, "We must unite in the battle against extremism. These arms could have landed in terrorist hands." From Uganda, President Museveni expressed, "My younger brother Traore has done something remarkable. Africa now has the strength to defend itself." From South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa commented, "This situation must serve as a wake-up call to the entire continent. Those trafficking in arms and aiding them must be held accountable." On the fifth day of the crackdown, new revelations surfaced. Files retrieved from confiscated computers uncovered the breadth of the operation. It wasn't limited to Burkina Faso. The entire Sahel belt was under threat. The documents exposed some shocking truths. There was a distinct blueprint for each country in Burkina Faso. Traore in Mali, Goïta in Niger, Tiani. Western-aligned governments were to be installed in their place. The economic scope of the plot was also revealed. The entire budget totaled $1 billion. Investigations were underway to trace its origins. Some leads pointed to Gulf nations, others to European entities. Traore convened a second press briefing. This time, his rhetoric was fiercer. Now the disguises had come off. He proclaimed, "Those seeking to re-enslave Africa must understand. We are the heirs of Thomas Sankara. We will never bow." The fresh files he disclosed were even more explosive. A complete roster of the administration planned after the coup had already been drafted. Ministers had been chosen, departments distributed. Even the initial policy orders had been outlined. Traore bellowed with fury, "Look at their arrogance. They had already divided up the ministries, without even toppling us." But they overlooked one truth. The citizens of Burkina Faso are the true guardians of this soil. Among the latest detainees were foreign operatives. 3 French nationals, 2 Britons, 1 American, and surprisingly, 2 Israelis. All bore diplomatic credentials, but none were accredited officials. Their questioning ignited a global controversy. The states involved demanded the release of their nationals, but Traore held his ground. "Possessing a diplomatic passport does not entitle anyone to violate our laws." By the 6th day, judicial hearings commenced. The suspects were brought before the tribunal. The allegations were severe: orchestrating a coup, forming a terrorist network, trafficking arms, and high treason. The courtroom was overflowing. Citizens demanded accountability. The accused appeared devastated. Some sobbed, others voiced remorse, but it was too late. The state prosecutor delivered the charges. The dossier was irrefutable. Audio tapes, surveillance footage, financial documents, and signed testimonies filled the records. Defense counsels faltered under the weight of the facts. At the same time, foreign pressure was escalating. Certain Western nations threatened Burkina Faso with punitive trade measures. But Traore did not waver. "Let the future record those who try to intimidate us." Endorsements surged from the East. Russia's spokesperson declared, "Every sovereign state has the right to safeguard its independence." Traore is championing a righteous campaign. China extended further support. "We will contribute security infrastructure to Burkina Faso. We stand beside them in their stand against terror." Turkey issued a statement of backing. "Africa's peace is our peace. Gun trafficking is a crime against humanity." Iran denounced the foreign conspirators. "Neo-colonial forces must exit Africa. Genuine democracy cannot be imposed by force." Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro announced Comrade Traore is a new visionary, the bold leader of anti-colonial resistance. On the 7th day, Traore addressed the people. Tens of thousands assembled to listen. His address was monumental. "Beloved compatriots, a week ago, we uncovered a vast plot against our republic. We confiscated 47 trucks brimming with arms. But more crucially, we dismantled their scheme. We apprehended those who sought to tear us apart and pit us against one another." The masses erupted in cheers. Traore went on, "This triumph is not ours alone. It is a victory for the continent. No outsider will dictate our fate again. No one will reduce us to pawns." Youth coalitions roared, "Traore!" Women shouted, "Triumph!" The elderly wept. Traore closed with a stirring promise, "We will forge these weapons into classrooms. We will construct clinics. We will transform tools of destruction into instruments of hope. This is our ultimate victory." The crowd burst into jubilation. People embraced, danced and sang. Burkina Faso had been rescued from ruin. By the 8th day of the operation, the ultimate resolution of the confiscated weapons was declared. As Traore pledged, part of the arms would be smelted and sold as recycled metal. The earnings would finance schools. A portion would be assigned to the national military to reinforce and upgrade Burkina Faso's security apparatus. The rest would be dismantled. But this incident transcended weaponry. It had become a beacon of Africa's reawakening. From this moment onward, Africa would steer its own path. With this mission, Traore had not only intercepted a lethal cargo, he had preserved Africa's dignity. The youthful president had once again challenged neo-imperialism and prevailed. As the reverberations of the operation echoed across the continent, a new chapter was unfolding in Africa. Now, no external force could intimidate Africa with arms, because Africa had awakened. It had leaders like Traore, and those leaders were marching hand in hand with their people, against neo-colonialism, toward emancipation, from oppression into clarity. On the 10th day of the operation, Traore made an unexpected decision. He convened a massive public assembly at Independence Square to exhibit part of the confiscated arsenal. Tens of thousands of citizens flocked to the venue. When they witnessed the immense collection of warfare instruments with their own eyes, many were shaken. How could this volume of arms have been funneled into our territory? The people murmured. An elderly man, tears streaking down his cheeks, whispered, "They intended to slaughter our grandchildren with these." A young woman cried out, "If Traore hadn't acted, we'd be engulfed in civil war right now." Then, Traore stepped forward to address the masses. "This is what I wanted you to witness. This was the nightmare they had designed for us. But we stayed alert. We stood united. And we triumphed." He then made a daring declaration. With the funds raised from selling these weapons, we will construct 100 schools. We will establish 50 health clinics. We will dig 1,000 kilometers of irrigation canals. These instruments of death will now serve the living. The crowd roared with approval. Right there on stage, a giant furnace had been arranged. In a powerful gesture, the initial batch of weapons was liquefied before the public. From the molten metal, a school bell was cast. "Every morning, when our children hear this bell," Traore declared, "they will be hearing the sound of peace." International delegates watched the event with admiration. A United Nations official stated, "This is unprecedented in African history. They are converting destruction into peace." The African Union's envoy gave an impassioned tribute. Traore didn't just intercept weapons, he redirected the course of Africa's future. Now, the entire continent will emulate this path. Meanwhile, court proceedings push forward. The testimonies of the accused exposed even deeper revelations. It became evident that the plot stretched far beyond Burkina Faso. It was a sweeping strategy aimed at destabilizing all of West Africa. The full pipeline of the captured weaponry was eventually traced. They had originated in Eastern Europe, transited through Libya, and funneled into the Sahel. Operatives had been placed in every country. Bribes had smoothed the way at every checkpoint. It was a vast, transnational criminal network. Burkina Faso relayed this intelligence to Interpol. Arrest notices were dispatched. The assets of major arms dealers were frozen. The web of global arms smuggling was finally being unraveled. On the 15th day, a nationwide celebration was announced. From that day forward, it would be observed each year as National Awakening and Victory Day. In classrooms, children would be taught about the operation. Future generations would be raised with vigilance. In his concluding address, Traore proclaimed, "This triumph confirms that Africa can stand independently. We are capable of defending ourselves. We can shape our destiny. And above all, when we are united, no one can break us. Not with firepower, not with wealth, not with deceit. Africa's moment has arrived." And that moment began with Burkina Faso. Other states were already awakening. Arms traffickers and their accomplices would no longer find sanctuary on African soil. Traore concluded, "Africa will no longer be a dumping ground for weapons. It will become a cradle of hope, a sanctuary of peace, liberty, and solidarity. And this sanctuary will welcome all humanity, not with weapons but with compassion, not with explosives, but with wisdom, not with gunfire but with fraternity." That was the true wonder. Not merely intercepting 47 trucks filled with weapons, but winning 47 million hearts. And those hearts now beat for sovereignty. They beat for pride. They beat for Africa.